Kia ora tātou, nau mai haere mai, and welcome everybody to our second meeting of the day, our extraordinary Committee of Council meeting for Wednesday the 2nd of March 2022. We've got a bit of echo.
Teams on and not muted.
Has somebody just can check their Teams are not muted in the building here? So, councillors, just a little bit of a change of plan because we've got quite a heavy agenda with us. We will we'll go through till we'll do 2 hours of this Committee of Council through till 3 o'clock. We'll have a break. We'll need it, and we'll then come back and finish off our council meeting, the part 2 items of our council meeting, and just see where we go after that. Okay. So, order of business is. Number 1 there is around apologies. And I haven't received any apologies from any councillor, so thank you. We will move through.
I might duck in and dive out as the day goes.
Okay, thank you, Lou. Councillor Finlay. Right, I'll just I'll recap and explain that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on our council YouTube channel, and understand the COVID-19 protection framework. We're all aware of that, so please follow those protocols. Health and safety, we understand the building well in terms of the non-smoking where the toilets are, and unlike the event of an emergency, to exit the building and to follow the committee administrator to Marae Ahine, the clock tower and the square. If I could ask all councillors and presenters, please give your name before speaking and do use the microphone at all times, especially those that may come out of the gallery to answer any questions. The structure of the debate today will be as we followed LTP some months ago. It worked well in a complex environment, and we broke it into sections. Each section will have a presentation from the officers, and we'll have questions and comments from the members, now elected members. Now, if anybody wants to recommend a change, we'll take that as a notice of motion for each section, and then the officer's recommendation will be taken at the end, it being a substantive and incorporating any of the motions passed. So I think we all understand that process. We'll break it into sections because there's quite a lot to go through. So we've got our members online, so the Deputy Mayor and Councillors Johnson, Dingwell and Finlay. So number 2 is notification of any additional items, and I don't have any. And then we come now to the declarations of interest, if there are any. There are none, thank you. And then number 4, which is the substantive part of our agenda, and the main item is the annual budget plan 2022-23 and adopting supporting information and the consultation document. So that's on page 5 of our papers. We have quite a substantive memo there in groups of papers from Cameron Mackay, our acting CFO, and our strategy of Finance, Steve Patterson. So perhaps I get you up to go through the first part of that. And councillors will break it in A to B, C, D to E, F and G on number 1, and then we'll do 2 and 3. Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. Thank you for your patience as I get set up here. So where we are is the first real look at the draft annual budget for 22-23. I'll give just a little bit of an overview of where we are at, and then we'll move into the schedules as indicated. So our starting point for the annual budget 22-23 has been to take year 2 of the recently adopted 10-year plan as the base point. So in keeping with the direction that we have set through that mechanism. The environment, it would be fair to say, that we're operating in has somewhat changed in terms of the impact that COVID is having on us. We're now finding ourselves in a position where inflationary pressures are impacting us more than what we had anticipated a year ago, and also the ongoing impact of constrained labour markets and material shortages. I think, to put it simply, council is a price taker where we are. We need to absorb a number of those costs and have little that we can do to actually not accept them. As an example, as a few examples, the price of oil has increased significantly. Oil's a major component of materials that we use, not just in vehicles, but also roading, maintenance, and so on and so forth. Interest rates have begun increasing, perhaps a little bit greater than what we had anticipated they would a year ago. We've had some supply chain shortages and increased costs for materials driven from COVID-19 mainly, and partly an effect of having closed borders up till now. But also adding to that, the central government's package of works to try and encourage investment, which has meant that some major regional infrastructure projects are underway. And also the drive for major house building initiatives. All of those are contributing to increased demand on supplies, which is impacting the price of them. It's fair to say that the labour market, that's been pretty well publicised, with record unemployment shortages, is meaning that is also an area where we're seeing some increased expectations out in the labour market, and that affects our ability to attract and retain our skilled staff. Where we are at this point, COVID has delayed our delivery of our programs by roughly 4 months because of lockdowns and so forth, and so that has been factored into our assessment on our ability to deliver as we'll get through the schedules. This year also sees our rating revaluation completed for our city. That has a consequence where there appears to be a shift towards higher land values on our residential sector, transferring away from the commercial sector. So that is another complication to this year's annual budget that we've had to consider, and we will talk about that. And then finally, towards the end of our discussions through this process, we need to talk about how we intend to engage, consult with our communities. So the one final caveat I'll put on this, we have a bit of time to discuss the use of Better Off funding through this process. At this stage, the draft annual budget does not consider utilising that funding. There are still some things that we are not 100% sure on in terms of how that's going to be applied. We expect to hear about that very shortly from DIA, but we do have some decisions and some options that we may wish to consider, whether we apply through the draft process or whether we wait until we have certainty around from DIA. Oops. So as I touched upon, just to recap, the interest rate on debt, we assumed 2.8% in our 10-year plan. So our interest costs have increased to 3.1%, which in terms of the size of council's debt portfolio does have an impact. We have factored in the fact that we would have a lower opening debt balance due to where we think we will land in terms of our delivery this year. And we are using the Beal price level adjusters, which is accepted in local government for inflation. However, it is worth noting that that comes through at 2.4% compared to recently released data on consumer goods index at 5.9%, which includes things like fuel and so on and so forth. So there are some real challenges for us. In terms of just an overview around our capital budgets, we have factored in carry forwards, and they are included in Schedule A, and also taken a realistic look as to what we think we can deliver and pushed out some of our programs to the 23-24 year, which is incorporated in Schedule B. As a result, we had planned to deliver in the 10-year plan 104 million in the 22-23 year. We've reduced that down, taking into consideration our ability to deliver to 93 million.
Sorry, Cameron, we've got some questions. We'll take them through because there's so much to go through here. So I'm quite happy if other councillors have questions to jump into the queue, and we'll get started. Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Cameron. Just a quick question in relation to that slide. The renewals being 1 million more than the 10-year plan budget, I'm trying to understand why then the 3-year rolling average is actually less than the 10-year plan budget?
Yes, so in terms of renewals, that incorporates carry forwards that we don't think we will complete by the end of this year, which have already been funded for, and we will not fund for them again.
Okay, thank you, that makes sense.
So perhaps if we go through the schedules at this point, A in terms of carry forwards, and if there are any questions or comments. In terms of the carry forwards, just to give you an overview here, we would update this assumption when we get to May, when we're closer to the end of the financial year. At this point, it's looking like that 36.7 million will be carried forward, but what we are doing is taking that realistic look and saying we don't think we will be doing 36.7 million of this work next year. There is 11.9 million that will be put to the 23-24 year, particularly around demands where we are waiting for developments rather than saying that it's simply going to happen. We are trying to program them in conjunction with our developers.
Okay, I've just got some questions. We'll jump in now. Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Cameron. On program 243, which is the urban bus terminal redevelopment, 75,000. What's the likelihood we'll get the co-funding from Waka Kotahi in this current climate where they're basically turning down everything at the moment? And what happens if we don't get it? Do we have to fund the whole thing ourselves?
I will pass that to Sarah, Chief Infrastructure Officer.
Through the Chair, we are just about to go out to tender to have the business case done to the Waka Kotahi standards to seek to secure that funding. So the intent is that if we get the good business case, we'll get the funding that we require at the moment.
Second question, it's already been rejected once. What's the likelihood of it getting through a second time?
Through the chair, we're working with the Better Business Case programme on a single stage business case. That's what we're seeking from our suppliers to more strongly make the case with Waka Kotahi. We're all aware, councillors are all aware of the risks, particularly with the demand on Waka Kotahi funding. There are no guarantees. All we can do is put our best foot forward. Waka Kotahi do recognise the importance of Palmerston North as a logistical hub and some of the implications that has for how we do stuff. And we get a lot of support from our local team, but there are no promises.
So backup plan, third question, backup plan if we don't get it is?
Through the chair, I think that part of the work that we'll be looking at in the single case, business case, is to look at funding mechanisms. So by the time that business case is complete, we will have a good view of whether we're making a good case to Waka Kotahi, but also where there might be alternative forms of funding.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Cameron. I've just got some general questions about the carry forwards and deferrals. So the first question is, the decision about which programmes to carry forward and defer to the 23-24 year, is that set in stone, or if elected members had projects that they would prefer to prioritise, could they be swapped in and out?
Sarah Sinclair, Chief Infrastructure Officer. Through the chair, each deferral has a specific reason. Some of them, I think, are more flexible than others. So I think on a case-by-case basis, Councillor Lorna, we'd have to work that through because some of them are for different reasons.
Okay, that makes sense. Can I ask some specific questions about programmes at this point?
Yes.
Okay, so my first question is around programme 2006, which is the City Centre Play, which is a capital new project, and I see it's being deferred, and the reason given is about strategic direction. Now, this is a project that came to us not in the last 10-year plan, but in the one before that. And at that point, it was delayed until we had a play strategy, a play policy rather. Now, the play policy has been developed. So what further strategic direction are we waiting on in order to get this city centre play project underway?
Kathy Deaver-Todd, Group Manager, Parks and Logistics. What this strategy now is about is the relative connection between this program and other programs the council is undertaking in the Central Business District. So, for example, what is our strategy in terms of incorporating play into projects such as Cuba Street, as Streets for People upgrades, that type of thing. So that overall strategic direction will then set out a program of play improvements rather than looking on a year-by-year basis as individual things. It will help highlight the opportunities rather than just plonking play in parts of the CBD without giving that consideration to other things that the council's doing.
Okay, I just don't understand why it's why we're 4 years on and we still haven't been able to respond to this, which came from, if I remember correctly, submissions from the public. When could we expect to be able to actually do this thing?
So through the chair, with the officers and council, we're working on this strategic direction and getting an understanding of that. anticipate by delaying this program that you will then see a pipeline of projects going forward and delivery next year. We're just not in a place at this stage. Some of that due to the inability to continue with our consultation and our meetings between officers because of COVID restrictions. We are probably a little bit further behind than where we wanted to have been at this stage.
Okay, thank you. The other, there are three specific programs I wanted to ask about. The second one is around program 1367, which is the streetlight infill. That budget has been reduced for this next financial year and deferred as well. Does that mean that in future years we'll be spending less per year on streetlight infill, and therefore the whole project of catching all the streets up to a compliant level is going to take longer?
Councillor, could you please tell us the number again?
It's 1367 streetlight infill. It's on page 4 of Schedule A, and it's on page 24 of Schedule B.
Sandra King, Acting GM Transport and Development speaking. That program was delayed due to the delay in Waka Kotahi funding, so it's being carried forward, so we will be catching up, and Council made a resolution to fully fund the program in the future years for the next 3 years through a Council resolution, so that is just a carry forward to account for the delay.
Okay, so the intention is to catch up and to still have it all completed at the same time?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one that I wanted to ask about was, which won't surprise anyone, program 1552, capital new, the animal shelter. I see there's a carry forward request on that. Can we just be reassured that the project has not been delayed, because that is a priority project in terms of being able to comply with the animal welfare legislation?
Bryce Hosking, Group Manager Property. At this stage, no, it has not been delayed. We're about to go out for tender and should be bringing a report to Council in May to award the contract.
So we still expect to finish that next financial year?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions on the carry forwards. I have got other questions, but I'll leave them till we get to that section. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Harper.
Sorry, I've got two more questions on carry forwards. One is on Cuba Street, 1440, and that's the tender's been awarded and we're only going to be spending 397 this year. Is that just due to COVID, not being able to complete any more work this year?
Through the chair, we're working through with the with Thornton Hogan, who awarded the contract, the programme of works, when would be the most efficient start time to complete the programme. I think it's fair to say that the COVID-related effects of resourcing are hitting all of our contractors at the moment. So yes, it is COVID-related.
Okay, thank you. Second question is on, hold on, it's to do with arena. So it's on page 19, 1051. It's to do with the CET arena renewals. Contractor delays have seen Arena 3 roofing project delayed. My question is around, probably more for Chris, is around, because the roofing will be delayed, does that mean that we will have problems with the usage of Arena? Because we're having problems with the roofing being delayed? So it's more about the usage of Arena.
Bryce Hosking, Group Manager Property. I can answer that question. No, it shouldn't have any material effect on the users. We are working closely with John and his team at Arena to make sure, but that's definitely been factored into the plans.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of my questions have been answered so far, which is great. So I've just got one at this stage, which is in relation to program 1367, the streetlight infill, the comment on the schedule of capital programs deferred refers to moving the budget. And so I'm just trying to understand whether essentially the total budget was just pushed back and would have a ripple effect in subsequent years that are not in front of us now, or whether the budget has been reduced.
Sandra King, Acting GM Transport and Development. The total budget has not been reduced, so it is literally just a push out of the work program we've got and fitting it into next year.
Great, thank you. That's all at this stage. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. My question is in more of a general nature in terms of the capital program. Like, I appreciate the work that's been done in looking at what's able to be delivered and the reasons why different ones are proposed to be carried forward. In terms of the size of the program being 92.9 million, I think it was, it's still about 50% more than what we've ever delivered before. I think we've delivered 63 was the most that we've delivered before last year. So my question is the size of the overall capital program realistic in terms of what can be delivered?
Through the chair, yes, I believe so. There's going to be a paper, Sarah Sinclair, Chief Infrastructure Officer, there's going to be a paper coming to the Infrastructure Committee later on this month, which talks about a lot of the work that we've done in response to COVID to try and secure the deliverability of what we're doing a bit more. That is particularly around bundling work and around bundling our procurement so that we can lock in suppliers for longer, where they prioritise our work more and where we can work more easily with the flow of work to make sure that the flow keeps going.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just had some questions that touch on the renewals and kind of bridge into the deferrals. In the deferrals and the next appendix. It's around program 1559, the urban cycle network improvements. I'm just really trying to understand at this stage, because we're just looking at going out to consultation, exactly what our position is. So in the first appendix, it shows that about $750,000's coming over into the next year. And then in the next appendix, it shows that there's no money in next year, but there's $3 million in the year after, and it's also talking about trying to change the ratio of co-funding. So my specific question is there any on-the-ground work that will be happening over FY23? And secondly, if we are successful with that co-funding proposal to go to 90%, would we see work over and above the $3 million that's indicated currently?
Sandra King, Acting General Manager, Transport and Development. The aim is to do a very robust engagement process, which will take us through in the first part of the rest of this year and into next year, with some construction starting probably near the end or beginning of next year, 23, and then into 24, 25. If we're successful with 90% funding, that gives us more potential money to play with in terms of council share. Sarah?
Through the chair, and because of that, the money that's being carried forward into next year will cover that consultation start of construction, with the 3 million that's been moved, the bulk of construction, the year after. Like everything, as all the councillors know, the consultation very much drives the programme, and if there are things that we can bring forward and build earlier because of support, having that 90% funding will give us more flexibility to do that. But the first bit is get everyone on board and get the plan going, which is what the carry forward of this year's money into next year will be doing.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, councillors. Back to you, Cameron. Actually, sorry, before you do go, just a couple. I've actually got one or two myself. I'll just catch up where I was. So, just around attachment 1A on page 15, program 1695, Pinity intersection bridge improvements, and 2 down, the urban growth around, again, connected to transportation with the Northeast Industrial Zone. They've been moved out. Is that just around just availability of getting those projects ready to go? And obviously connected to that outer freight ring road.
Sandra King, Acting Transport and Development Manager. Yes, you're correct. It is about timing. We have approval from Waka Kotahi for the KB Roberts line. That's our safety improvement project that's been getting over the line. We're getting ready to go out for design. The bridges need further investigation, and then it needs to go through an approval process with Waka Kotahi, so that still has to happen. And the urban growth, Roberts-Richardson line upgrade, we've completed the design and we're pretty much ready to go out on that.
Okay, so we're just in a holding pattern until approvals, is that right?
For Richardson's, the tenders will come to you for approval, and then we'll hopefully hit the go button. The other one, there's work going on, but there will be a point at which we seek additional funding for some of it. We've got funding for some, but not the bridges yet.
Yeah, well, the bridges are quite important because we can't operate as a city without them.
No, they're very important. We are negotiating hard with Waka Kotahi.
Yeah, thank you. Just one final one was around. It goes to B on page 22, and it was really around the urban growth and program 1857 around reserves, Kiki Whenua. So we've started purchasing there, is that right? Or are we just waiting to do that?
Kathy Deaver-Todd, GM Parks and Logistics, through the chair. We have got ongoing conversations about all the parcels of land, both with our planners and with the developers and with Rangatane. The pace there and the discussions have been about the pieces of land that we wish to purchase, but those discussions haven't yet progressed to the stage where we're in a sale and purchase or a settlement process. So those are ongoing, and we're really there determined by the pace at which the developer is preparing to put in their application to council.
Right, so when they do, all those buttons obviously get pushed.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a program that is difficult to predict the timing, but when it occurs, the capital is spent quite suddenly.
Right, okay, thank you. Back to you, Cameron. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're just going to get your screen back up.
Okay, thank you. Just a clarification, Mr. Mayor. Is the intention to continue on with the schedules, or were you going to get approval on schedule by schedule at this point?
So we were going to do A and B together. So it's around assumptions regarding the carry forwards of capital programs from 21-22 year as detailed in Schedule A, but also B, deferrals of capital programs from 2022-23 to later years as detailed in Schedule B, doing those together because they sort of are all together. So there was a lot of questions about A, not a lot about are there any questions? Because you've done that part, yeah. So councillors, just this is your time to speak on Schedule B, which is in your papers from page 22 on. So I started touching on it. Yeah, 22 on to 27. So we'll just give everybody just a moment. We're going to go slow today.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, are you wanting additional recommendations moved
No. I just would like, if there's any questions of the officers. Yeah, and then we'll go through any recommendations separately. So this is just your chance to tease out, and we've got all these lovely people in the gallery that are going to answer all the questions.
So this is just on B, you're asking for questions now, just on Schedule B, is that right?
Yeah, just Schedule B, councillor. I've managed to tease one out, otherwise we're going to move on. Councillor Beattie. You right? Oh, you've disappointed. All right. Okay, so Cameron, we're now through, you're going to move Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in regards to the, if I'm reading this right, the Eco City, when we've got some programs around Te Motua Potua, there is 2 programs there, from what I can understand. One for a smaller amount, and then the larger amount. Can I just understand pushing them out to, I guess, what becomes year 4, essentially, for reconsideration in the next term? Can I understand those 2 elements a little bit better, and why they can't be achieved, particularly that smaller amount?
Kathy Deaver-Todd, GM Parks and Logistics, through the chair. So councillors will be aware from the workshops that we've held recently that the progress with Te Motua Potua as a partner needs to get to a point where we have a design as a draft that will go into a development plan that will then be consulted on with the community. So that process has taken a lot longer. The intention of pushing out these programs is to reflect the fact that we need to have developed that draft program, have identified the funding sources, have looked at the feasibilities, have gone through design phase before we could start to construct something. So the smaller program is about completing that development plan and consultation and into the early stages of design, and then moving through into the major construction. Really, councillors, until we've got that draft development plan in front of us, the amount of capital and the timing of the capital is very uncertain. So by pushing it out, it gives you the opportunity to reconsider the amount and the timing and the funding of that as part of your next annual planning budget process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so are there no other questions of what we've got is A and B. And are there any notices of motion off the floor? I mean, the officers have done quite a bit of work in this space, and it's been pretty thorough. I'm not seeing a huge amount. I'll come to you, Councillor Dennison.
Yeah, I'm happy to move them as they're reported as A and B in the order paper. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Dennison.
So we'll just bring that up. Sorry, Cameron, we're going to jump around a little bit. So this is A, around assumptions regarding carry forwards of capital programs from the 21-22 year as detailed in Schedule A in the draft of the 2022-23 annual budget, and then number B, which is that the Chief Executive incorporate the deferrals of the capital program, and look, I'm quite happy to second that. Capital program from 2022-23 to later years as detailed in Schedule B. So, councillors, before we go to vote on this, are there any other comments? I'd just like to acknowledge staff's work and just looking where we can do this work, being realistic. I think everyone's looking in the mirror pretty well and seeing what we can actually achieve and what we can defer to later years. So I appreciate the work that's gone in the background there. Councillor Dennison, I'll default to you if there's any right of reply there. Okay. So councillors, what we'll do is we'll just vote on A and B. And that has passed 15 votes for and 1 against. Oh, Councillor Butt, you pressed the wrong button. We'll schedule that as we'll change that to be 16 in favour, so it's unanimous. You're forgiven, Councillor Butt. All right, got to have a sense of humour. All right, moving through to C, which is around the variations to operating programs as detailed in Schedule C. So I'll come back to you, Cameron, and we'll hold some questions to the end if we can.
Okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor. So this section here, what we are trying to outline are alterations to the operating program from the long-term plan. Just to run through just briefly run through, but they are up on screen. Health and Safety Improvement Program, what that's about is to improve the maturity level of health and safety for the council, and that's from prior health and safety audits recommendations. So that's been put forward. That is a program that starts off in the next in the 22-23 financial year, and has an element of continuation. The other one I'd like to highlight there is Program 1319, Wastewater BPO Program. Just to give some reminders, I guess, this program originally was an operating program for the long-term plan. Because the preferred option in the space has been selected, we are now able to capitalise the costs moving forward, and therefore removing it as an operating program to a capital new program. But happy to take any questions, really.
All right, so councillors, that's on page 27 of our papers. and I'll open it up for questions, and we have a number. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Cameron. I have two programmes to ask questions about. First, 1506 community events. My understanding is that it's framed as if it's an additional 60k for cultural events, but that's really to correct a previous error. So just want to clarify exactly what's going on there, please.
Luke's best placed to answer that.
Thank you, Luke.
Luke McIndoe, Head of Events, through the Chair. Yeah, there's two elements in there. One's a post-COVID correction. The other one is to rectify an additional amount of funding to fund cultural events, which was the 60k amount.
So where did that 60k come from? Luke, was that long-term plan?
Yeah, it was a recommendation from early 2020 to the Arts, Culture, Heritage Committee that wasn't actioned through error at the long-term plan.
Previous decision of council. Thank
Correct.
you. And my second question is on 2130 Heritage Advisory Panel, which is proposing an additional budget of $135,000. How much of that $135,000 is for the element of the programme which was for a designated additional planning position?
I'd have to go back and check the detail on the program, but it would be around approximately 100,000.
Thank you. Thanks.
So just on that, and maybe coming to you, David, did we not employ a heritage planner or a person that had heritage planning expertise previously? Is that not already an existing or part of an existing position?
So one of our planning roles, a portion of that, probably a quarter to a third, was spent dealing with some heritage-related matters in terms of administering the Heritage Fund and dealing with sort of heritage inquiries. When this program was put up, I think it was described as being a real step up in terms of our, I guess, the delivery of our heritage function. And I think when we look at the sorts of work that's come out of the sort of military heritage research and the work that would come out of a heritage advisory panel, I think the reality is we would need somebody to be preparing the work for the heritage advisory panel and responding to any, the research and heritage themes they produce. So I think without an additional staff person, without an additional staff member working on heritage, that work would fall on planners who are also busy driving growth programs.
So it couldn't be done within, in a roundabout way, it couldn't be done within the existing budgets?
Yeah, we'd be having to stop rezoning proposals for housing and industrial growth to redirect that resource to supporting the Heritage Advisory Panel.
Okay. And how quickly would that role begin? Like, I'm trying to frame up where my question's going. If the Heritage Panel was to meet, say, quarterly, would that person pretty well need to start straight away to engage?
Well, if the budget was approved, we'd be getting underway with recruitment as soon as possible. The intention would be to try and recruit an experienced planner who's worked in heritage matters before. To be honest, there may well be some challenge in recruiting somebody of that experience, but that would be our intention given, as I said, the description when this suggestion was put forward was to really step up our work in this space, given there are a significant number of heritage issues in the city, but also some significant opportunities.
Good, thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Well, here we go. Yeah, with the wastewater, you talk about we've changed the plan and we're going to be spending less. But with free water still looming there, how much are we actually budgeting next year to spend on the wastewater program?
Can one of the officers answer that in a roundish term?
or close as?
Through the chair, I think we've got 2.5 million in this year's budget, 1.8 in next year's, and 18 over the rest of the LTP at the moment. Because the assumption is that longer periods of time, water reform means that the budgets and the debts will move to the new entity C.
Okay, but from that, the money we're budgeting for next year, we still have the rate for, is that correct? For the borrowing?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Cameron. I have 3 questions, and just to follow on from the Heritage Advisory Panel budget, if I can, through you, Mr. Mayor, probably ask David. David, the current budgets for the planners area, have you got a full, have you got positions you're advertising for now besides that one? I mean, have you got a full budget and resources?
So we have no vacancies in the strategic planning team at present, in the city planning team.
So you're fully staffed?
Yes.
Okay, and is your current, besides this position, have you got enough resource for that, for what you're doing with all your growth for Whakaranga and everything?
There is another operating program which has been put up to advance those rezoning processes. The bulk of that funding would likely be used on technical reports to inform the rezonings rather than additional resource for planners. So I think the team are busy. There are a number of big plan changes on the go, but I think that the resourcing is sufficient. And as I said, that additional operating budget of 200,000 is more for those technical reports, liquefaction, stormwater, transport, those sorts of things to support the rezoning.
And if we did approve this heritage person, then that person's skills would also be able to cross-pollinate across what you were doing in other areas besides heritage if required?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the consistent with the, I guess the request for this piece of work was around a real step up around heritage. Yep. So if this budget was approved, we'd be looking at somebody full-time working on heritage matters. They would probably pick up that sort of third of that role that the person working on those other heritage projects were doing, so it would free up a little bit of capacity with that role, but effectively this would be a new role and it would be focused on heritage.
Okay. Thank you for that. My second question is around the asset management plan, program 1885, and the, hang on, just find it. The budget's deferred by 1 year, and I'm just a bit worried. Oh, thank you, Hannah. I'm just a bit worried about that particular program, because to me it's quite an important program. And is there any reason for that, please?
So Helen Churton, Manager Asset Management Planning. Through the Chair, we have quite an extensive improvement plan, as we've talked about before, and we've done quite a lot of timing planning around that. So what I did is I reviewed the timing planning and made sure the budget aligned with the timing planning for how we're actually rolling that out. So we were able to look at that and say, actually there's quite a lot of things we're doing the year after that we need the money for, to actually step that money through to align with the timing that we've already determined.
Okay.
Does that answers your question?
Thank you. And my final question is around the Health and Safety Systems Program, the $1 million for that program. And my apologies, I wasn't at the workshop, so if you're going over previous questions. What I'm trying to understand around that program is there any hardware and software components?
Wayne Wilson, People Ops Manager. At this stage, that hasn't been decided or determined whether there would be hardware involved, but that is possibly a component of it. This is more about the first year of it is developing the plan and, well, having the plan developed and being able to follow through on that with the expertise that we need to deliver that.
So am I correct that you actually haven't developed the plan yet?
That's in process at the moment.
So how do you know you need $1 million?
Yeah, no, sorry. I think there was, the presentation went through. Sorry, I wasn't at it either.
I've read the presentation.
Yep.
I wasn't at the workshop and I've read it, but I'm sorry, I'm struggling with the detail of it, and I'm a details person, and I can't see the action plan, and I've seen I've seen hardware system, and I've seen different figures, but nothing tangible that says what are you going to deliver.
No, I think that's what's being developed at the moment, to be able to give you that detail.
So would it be fair enough to say that you might just want some concept money, that $1 million in this budget might come later when you've given us the concept?
Well, my understanding is that that will be finished by the time this budget is required.
Okay, no, you've answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions. One is about Programme 2129, which is the free rubbish bag scheme. Do we have any idea of the cost of recycling being contaminated at the moment? In other words, what we've got here is the cost to us to provide the rubbish bag, but we haven't got the corresponding saving that we might see if contaminated recycling is reduced. Could I try and get an understanding of what that might be?
Acting Group Manager of Resource Recovery, Bryce Hosking, a different hat this time. Essentially, that number, or that concept is made up of a lot of assumptions. Whether there would be any kind of material reduction in contamination, we are unsure at this stage. There is a lot of assumptions. I have to really hammer that home. There may also be some impacts on revenue, as some of those people that would now be getting a free rubbish bag may have already been purchasing rubbish bags, and we just don't hold that data at this point.
Okay, so that figure is for one free rubbish bag per month for all low-income households in the whole city for a year. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is about the Health and Safety Improvement Programme. I'm wondering, you know, we had explained to us the need for it around the fact that in the last two audits, our health and safety has been assessed as developing rather than being effective. But I'm wondering if there's if we were to consider reducing that budget in the first place, what impact that would have on the health and safety. In other words, could something be achieved for a lesser budget, or is that seen to be an all or nothing figure?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, Wayne Wilson, People Ops Manager. I was discussing this with Patrick, and he believes that that this is what's required to move this forward. But at the moment, the resources we have in terms of staffing maintain the system that we've got and make small improvements. And this is looking at making a large improvement to improve the safety of all of our staff. So I think the answer is at this, that this is put forward as a program of work that is required to be done, or we believe is required to be done.
Okay, thank you. That's it from me.
Thank you, Councillor. Just while I've got Mr Wilson there, so are you, in health and safety, are you fully staffed at the moment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Two questions, one related to 2129, which we were just on. So if that cost of 165,000 for the free rubbish bags is every low-income household times 12 months times the cost of those bags, it seems that we might not have 100% uptake, you know, from the dot. So if there was unspent money in that budget, what would happen to that money? And have we done any modeling around sort of what uptake might look like and perhaps a more likely cost?
I can answer part of your question through Mr Mayor. In terms of any unspent money in terms of that program, that would form part of an operating surplus within the year. It has the potential that we could use that to enhance or increase the uptake of that program potentially if there was such money available. To touch on Bryce's points earlier, there are a number of assumptions in this, and I think we would really only truly understand the full impact once we're actually rolling this out, I would think. But Bryce might be able to add to that.
Yes, Bryce Hosking, Acting Group Manager, Resource Recovery. Yeah, essentially, we don't hold any data for, so this is based on people who have a community services card, and we currently do not have any data on their current habits and uptakes in terms of bag purchases, or indeed have any data to support whether they would or would not take advantage of this.
Thanks, that's helpful. Second area of question is around 2125, which is the Jets sponsorship. I understand the 10,000 and remember that decision. I was interested in the 25,000 and how that costing is arrived at.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Chris Tyberg, Chief Customer Officer. The 25,000 is on the basis of providing free venue hire, and 25,000, I can't remember the exact assumptions, but it assumes a certain number of games, so it is sort of revenue foregone effectively.
Right, so it's about revenue foregone rather than actual cost incurred.
That's correct. So the way, what would happen is effectively that amount would come off the revenue budget for venues. So we would reduce it from, I don't know what it is, but by 25,000 to allow for the fact that we're assuming a lower revenue.
So do we know what the actual cost is of providing the service as opposed to what the foregone revenue is?
I can't remember exactly what that is. I have seen some details, but I mean, it's the number is specifically around revenue. It hasn't been calculated based on actual cost.
No, thanks. You've clarified that. So then, to understand the decision to spread that cost across all ratepayers versus, say, keeping it within venues as a business unit and saying, well, you can balance your books effectively within that business unit. Can I just understand what, if any, discussion happened around that?
Well, essentially, you know, venues, like all parts of council, operates under a funding policy, and they're supposed to recover a certain amount of their operating costs through fees that they charge to others, and that's where it basically starts. So, effectively, what would happen is, you know, they wouldn't potentially not going to meet their funding targets.
So, was there any consideration of spreading that $25,000 cost against other venue hires effectively rather than spreading it onto the ratepayers?
It would amount to the same thing. So basically all we're saying is that, you know, so we're not going to get we're not going to get that money in. So so the alternative I think you're suggesting would be that we put up our rates to other venue hires to recover the extra 25,000. No, we haven't considered that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dingwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my question is heading back to number 2130 Heritage Advisory Panel. I understand the amount that's described as being for the specialist advisor on the heritage part, but I was more curious around the extra funding there and whether that and how that compares with things like the disability reference groups, the senior and Pacifica reference groups, and how I guess that work, how that work compares to those groups as being within existing budgets or not.
Yeah, I can't talk to the specific details of the other working groups. What I can talk to is the rationale for this budget. So the rationale for this budget is, as I said earlier, a specialist heritage planner to get that step up that's been sought or was talked about when this program was deferred or recommended for this to be considered as part of this process. The balance is to undertake some, I guess, research across heritage themes across the city, a bit like what was done with the military heritage theme. So the idea is we'd bring in some consultants, specialist historians, those sorts of things to undertake that research with that balance of the funding to better understand the history in Palmerston North to allow the Heritage Advisory Panel to then develop a program. So that's the intent of the balance of the funding.
Okay, so it's more about the research aspect of it then from what I understand you've said. But I'm just wondering, in terms of the other people that are on the panel, there'd be one person that's paid to do I guess the bulk of it that you've already explained, and then there's staff resources that are going towards the research side of things. Will there be volunteer panel members on that specific group that would come in under this budget as well?
Yes, so the advisory panel would be volunteers, local experts. The role would be, as I said, a specialist heritage planner, and the balance of the funding would be consultancy to undertake research to inform the work program.
So there's no part in that budget of, I guess, supporting the other volunteers that are on that panel?
No.
In terms of meeting fees or room hierages or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I just really want to just go back to program 2129, which is the free rubbish bag per month for low-income households. I think when we that went through, this general sentiment behind that was to support lower income households. But I guess my concern is that if you're actually looking at a 2-year program, $165 per year, there are some things perhaps that we need to evaluate, such as the uptake, and I'm going to come to a question in a moment, ability to deliver service to those most in need. Does the program actually improve the lives of those that are targeted by this, and does it reduce contamination of recycling? I'm just trying to seek some comment here in terms of the feasibility, implications and costs of perhaps a 6-month trial.
Bryce Hosking, Acting Group Manager, Resource Recovery. Well, speaking firstly to the point about contamination, just to be clear, we also have no data necessarily of what segment of Palmerston North is actually causing the contamination. We know there is contamination, but we have no data to suggest that there's any one area of the market, whether it be lower income or higher income. So just to be clear on that. In terms of doing a trial, look, it is possible. Exactly what that would cost, well, the same sort of assumptions that have been used to formulate the $165,000 would have to be used here as well. So if you wanted to do 6 months, you could divide it by 2, but would that actually be an accurate sum? Unable to give you much direction on that at this point if our assumptions are proven to be incorrect.
Thanks, Bryce. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just talking to program 2133, the Health and Safety Improvement Program. Thanks, Wayne. My question goes to the transformation project budget. I wondered how much of that was unspent to date. I know it's a question I haven't asked yet, and I probably should have asked it before this. Cameron, I don't know if you know that, because my question was whether some of that money could have been used to be put towards this health and safety improvement program.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have that information in front of me, but I could seek to find out.
Would it be in the hundreds of thousands? I mean, just so that we've got an idea of how much of that transformation money hasn't been spent yet, so that we've got an idea.
So, Councillor, that's program 1826 are we talking about? Okay. Workplace transformation. Is that a capital that's more of a capital program, is it?
So that's the first question. The second question is, could we look to spreading the health and safety improvement program over 2 years, so that we didn't get hit with it for $1 million over 1 year, we got hit with it over 2 years? That's the second question.
Just for some clarity, Councillor, are you talking about workplace transformation or workforce transformation? There's 2 different programs with similar names. Workplace transformation is a capital new project focused very much on physical transformation of this building.
Sorry, I've put the councillor wrong. Yeah, you're right. Program 1826 is workplace transformation, and program 1929 is the workforce transformation.
Workforce transformation, just to be clear on that, which is in Wayne's area.
Again, Wayne Wilson, People Ops Manager through. 1929, the workforce transformation, that's around looking at things in relation to staffing of the organisation and development of staff. So around capability, leadership capability, future reward, employee experience type things is what we're using that money for. And yeah, I notice that has been reduced from what was asked for. That has already been reduced by 50%. In terms of the health and safety one, the program as it was presented is over 4 years, and so the $1 million is for the first, was for next year, and then there's a couple other years after that that have lower amounts that have been requested, I believe.
Okay.
So, yeah, how the timing of it, I'm not, I couldn't be exact on whether that could be spread between those other 2 years.
Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Who I'm asking the question to.
So as I said earlier, the city planning tool at the moment, so we have no vacancies. So this would be additional resources, largely to support the technical components of rezoning proposals which we don't have in-house. For instance, we have a significant number of plan changes and rezoning proposals underway at the moment that require liquefaction assessment, acoustic assessments, a range of sort of specialist engineering assessments where those are being funded through this process. So I sound like a little bit of a broken record, but some of the rezoning proposals we have on at the moment are significant in terms of the history of Palmerston North. We are in the process of preparing rezoning proposals that will add the size of fielding to Palmerston North. So that requires a lot of information and a lot of technical information. So this funding is to ensure that we can get those processes through as quickly as possible to address what is becoming a significant housing supply issue, particularly in terms of greenfield land.
Okay, thank you. And the second question relates to the 2129, the free rubbish bags. Now that report came to the December Finance and Audit meeting, and that report was received for information, and it had a range of options in it, which ranged from 82,000 to 166,000. And in the summary, it said that if elected members choose to proceed and provide one free rubbish bag per month to allow low-income households, then it would be necessary to determine, it would need to be revised to acknowledge that either bag sale prices would need to increase or additional operating funding would be required. So given the variety of options that were presented in that report, of how that could be funded and a range of funding options, how did it arrive in these papers as a cost of 165,000?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can have an attempt to answer that. My understanding is we have wanted to show what we think the cost of that program would be if we switched it on. The reason why there was a range in that particular paper in December from 80,000 to 160 odd thousand touches on Bryce's comments earlier, in which we're not sure in terms of what the impact will be, whether that will mean that people go from buying rubbish bags to having a free rubbish bag, or whether we would get increased volumes and from them potentially being previously contaminated or disposing of the rubbish in other ways. We have not at this stage worked out what the increase in the rubbish bag per bag would be if it was to be funded through that mechanism. But I am aware of discussions where there is concern where we are, in a sense, have some competitors in the private market in this space, and we didn't want to exacerbate the problem of affordable rubbish services, is my understanding.
Okay, and just one further question related to that program. In that report, it highlighted the issue that us progressing this would actually be in contradiction to our long-term plan policy. How would we get around that if we were to progress this program? Or is that an issue?
Could you just clarify what policy?
Okay, I can find it. I think it was one of the risks identified in the report. Perhaps I can find it and come.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a point of clarification or correction, please?
Yes.
So the elected member said that at the meeting in December that various options were produced, and how did we get to this point? But actually a resolution was passed that the Chief Executive prepare a programme enabling provision of one free rubbish bag per month for community service card holders for council consideration in the annual budget process. So that's why we've got 1 year programme, because we passed that resolution at the December Finance Committee meeting.
Good. Okay. Thank you for that help. Steve?
Yes, in relation to the policy, I think from memory the report was referring to the revenue and financing policy of the council, which is really talking about the who should pay for various elements of the resource recovery or rubbish and recycling activity. Yeah. And this particular proposal it's a moot point as to who should be paying in the end, so there was just a concern that it might not be directly and strictly applying with the policy, but the policy is because in the end, the way that whole activity is funded is through a rubbish and recycling charge as opposed to a general rate. And so I don't see it as being too at odds with that policy, to be honest.
Okay. And just, in terms of the point that Councillor Johnson raised, for whatever reason, that wasn't recorded in the minutes of that meeting, so I'm not sure why that is. But I just need...
Excuse me, Mr Chair, through you, correction again. I have the minutes in front of me and that resolution is recorded in the minutes. Thank you.
I have the minutes in front of me too, and they're not the ones I'm looking at. So that's all right. We must be looking at something different.
Okay, we'll put that one to the side and we'll move on.
Mr Mayor, just need to indicate that I've got 7 recommendations related to the schedule. So happy to move them whenever is the appropriate time.
All right, so we've still got some councillors that want to speak, so we'll now go to you, Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I just wanted to clarify the inaccurate information that was being shared with elected members, and I feel that I have done that, and the minutes that I'm referring to are the minutes that are published online. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm getting nods from governance, so that's fine. Okay, all right. So what we've got there is Schedule C, and...
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I thought I was in the queue and I haven't been.
Okay.
I just have one more question,
Sure.
if you would indulge, which is on 2136 city marketing campaigns. And I was expecting to raise this in a discussion of the CD, but I think the way we're going, there won't be a discussion of the CD. So, 2 questions. That movement is an additional $150,000 to allow for 3 marketing campaigns a year. Is that $50,000 each marketing campaign, or is that a general uplift in order to enable delivery across the piece?
Donna Baker, Head of Marketing and Communications, through the Chair. That 150,000 has been, on average, a campaign is around 40,000, but included in that 150 is also the bids that we do to bring events and conference organisers into here. So those campaigns are based throughout the year. They support the reputation. So through the economic development strategic direction, where it was about building the reputation of the city, about building visitor numbers and encouraging people to come here for events, that money is being spent in that. So that's 150 for across the year.
Thank you. That covers that basic question, I suppose. And then the second part to that is, is this programme what's being referred to in the discussion, the consultation document, where it talks about we need more money for city marketing functions? Is that
yes,
what that's about?
That addresses that, yes.
Okay, and what has that got to do with it coming over from CEDA in 2021?
So the city marketing came across from CEDA, and with that came a budget of 200,000, 40,000 went into international relations, 160 stayed. That was used to resource through an FTE and used for creative. So this is ongoing campaign money so that we can continue to deliver city campaigns to support the economic development of the city.
Thank you for that information. I've got some comments on that.
Yeah. Can I, just while you're there, Donna, so the total city marketing budget is in, this would be on top of the 600-odd thousand that you already operationally have?
Yes, but that is for the whole of the comms and marketing budget. The marketing budget within the comms and marketing for marketing itself is actually only 40,000 uncommitted.
Okay, so that 600-odd thousand doesn't include FTEs, I would take.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so it includes all the staff?
All the staff.
Okay, so it's really a staffing budget?
Yes,
right.
Yes.
Thank you. Right, okay. We've got no more questions? Any more questions online? No? All right. Okay, so we are looking at C. which is around variations to operating programs as was scheduled in Schedule C. Now there's a number of notices of motion here, and we'll just work through some of those. And there's a number from Councillor Naylor and a few from a couple of others. So I'll go to you first, Councillor Naylor, as majority are yours.
Thank you. I've got a number of pieces of paper here, and they're all in different orders. So look, I'll start from in the order of the piece of paper that governance have provided at the top. The second one there, which relates to the...
it's on screen.
Sorry. Oh, no, perhaps I'll come back to...
Okay.
Do you want me to start with that one?
Yeah, it's your order.
Okay, that doesn't relate to the schedule, but the second one does.
Okay.
Which is that the following proposed new operational program is removed and is included in a list titled Considered but Not Included, and starting with program 2129 being the free rubbish bag per month to low-income households. So that's 165. Now we've had obviously some questions around this, and apologies to Councillor Johnson, I have located the additional recommendation that she refers to, so I hadn't seen that originally. But so it has been referred to this process for consideration. It's been included in our papers, yet, however, I think it's probably needs more teasing out in terms of the various options of how that could be. And, you know, I like the idea, how it could be applied or how it could be funded, but at this point, I guess just to give a backdrop to why I'm proposing to remove it, I think at the moment our consultation document that is to be looked at later makes a comment on page 3 acknowledging the costs of our ratepayers. Their bills are going up. And it says, so we've taken a hard look at our work, thinking about what we could delay and what is still feasible. Now, I think that's a very true statement when it comes to the work that officers have done in terms of our capital program. But I don't think it's a true statement for the way that our operational program in these papers look. At the moment, there is many millions of dollars more in these papers than what is in the year 2 of our long-term plan in terms of operational costs. And that, I've worked out, that adds about 4% to the rate. So if we took out everything of the operational costs that have been added in here that weren't in our year 2 of our long-term plan, we would be looking at about between 4 and 5% rates increase to our community. I believe that should have been our starting point today. So I'm proposing that we debate some of these additional items about whether they should be in or out. My reason for suggesting that it could be in a list of considered but not included, I think that gives our community the message that it's still a program that we're looking at or considering. If they think it's important enough, they would tell us. So I think our starting point in consulting with our community should be down at that rates level of between 4 and 5, and then showing them what we could add if they're actually willing to pay more, rather than telling them that it has to be an 8% rates rise and there's nothing we can do about it, because that is not being honest with our community. So that's the preamble perhaps to why I'm proposing a number of changes here. That one is an additional 165,000. There's a lot of programs that are 50, 100, 200,000, and they all add up to a few million, which is a few percent, you know, a few more extra percent of rates. So at the moment, I don't believe we should be including it. In the current environment, I think we need to be thinking about who is paying this 8%, and that's not to even mention the impact of the revaluations that we'll be looking at later that mean it might be 11.5% or more. So I think we owe it to our community in the environment that we need to understand. Many of our ratepayers are in the COVID environment. I spoke to someone last week whose interest rate had gone up for their mortgage, and that's another $80 a week they're having to come up with. It's been acknowledged by officers, oil prices, petrol prices, we all know about food prices. I think we need to think about the decisions we make about what rates increase we impose or propose to our community, and we should give them a starting point that is actually reasonable and one that we are comfortable with. What is in front of us today is not one that I'm at all comfortable with. And so that's why I do have about just over $4 million worth of operational expenditure that I'd like to see removed. So this is the first one. So I won't speak for that long for everyone, but I just thought I needed to give that background as to the rationale of why I'm asking to take it out. I'm not suggesting it's a stupid idea. I actually quite liked the idea when we considered it at the committee. But I don't think our starting point should be that it's in there. I think some of the issues around it is that we could, if we put it in there, we would be requiring our ratepayers to spend that money, $165,000, even if we only needed 30 or 40,000 of it, and then the rest of the money may be in the operational surplus to be used for something else that might not have visibility of elected members. So my view is that it should stay out, but we should acknowledge it's a program that we've considered but not included. And that's to be seconded by Councillor Hapeta.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So we're just discussing, you've given us the preamble, but we're discussing this one first, around the proposed new operational program is included but not considered, is around the free rubbish bag per month to low-income households. I just want to make a few comments too, and look, I totally, 99% of programs that are put up by councillors have real merit, and just to sort of back up Councillor Naylor's point, when we went out, I think it was 2 years ago, I can't recall now if it was a year or 2 years ago, in the same vein, we looked at the community, what did the community think, and it was around the under-5 swimming, and we heard they really did want it. So I do have, I have some, I like this, and I hate fly tipping, absolutely hate it. But there's a sort of couple of levers you've got to pull. And do we give a free rubbish bag to and who's low income? I know it is community services people, but what about the little old lady that is really struggling to pay her rates, which is going to go up to double digits, let's be honest, if we continue down this vein. You know, are they community card holders? No, they're not, but they're still paying for the service. And I know there is real merit in this, but I think we've got to draw the line somewhere. I too, like Councillor Naylor, have some real issues with where we're going in terms of the overall percentage. I look back to our vision of small city benefits, big city ambition. Absolutely, if we didn't have COVID and we didn't have all these other issues, we would continue to push the button on ambition. But we do have to look at what's happened in recent times. And in this price taker environment, I think it's quite foolish to just go head on into this headwind, and who knows where we're going to end up. So at an 8.4% increase and plonking this on top, or part of it, I think let's let our community tell us. If our community says, yes, we're into this, I'm in it to a boots and all. But I do support Councillor, or the recommendation there to put it into the considered, but at this stage not included. It's a very, very worthwhile program. But councillors, I think we've got to cut our cloth at some stage, and things have changed. So hence I will be supporting the notice of motion that goes forward. Right, we'll open it up. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to the mover for raising this to our attention. Unlike the arguments put forward so far, I'm generally not in favour of beginning to create a short list of sort of programs that are on the fence, because I think it tends to distract the community's view of the budget as a whole, and the question is where we are actually going, and you end up almost hijacking the debate onto a few actually quite small items in the grand scheme of things. So sort of my first concern around this is this precedent of beginning to set up an array of relatively small items that'll be on a considered list. So not a fan of that. Likewise, not a fan of sort of changing things at this point in process. I think that we have a package in front of us that really what we need to do is ask the community what they think about, and then be prepared to make some cuts where identified. But I'm very much against the idea of putting together a short list of likely candidates for the CHOP. This program itself is very much one that actually offers a win-win in terms of both doing something for people in need in the community, as well as addressing some of the challenges that we do have around our resource recovery system. So I'm obviously very much a fan of the idea, but very much want to hear community input within the whole of the budget rather than isolating it out onto a short list, so I won't be supporting the recommendation.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I will also take the opportunity of just giving a couple of overview remarks before I address this specific first in the long line of amendments to chop things out of the budget from Councillor Naylor. So I'm just going to take you back to the 2020 budget, which we went out and consulted on. And whilst we were consulting, COVID hit, the lockdown and everything. And when we came back, there was bids to chop the expenditure back because we were worried about the effect of COVID on people. And many people lived to regret that vote. Some of them are still sitting around the table. And the fact is that every time there's a COVID crisis, we seem to have people kind of losing their nerve a bit and saying, oh, we've got to start chopping things. It's not even a year since we went out to consult on the long-term plan. And when we consulted on that, that was during COVID times. Sure, it might not have been during a lockdown, but it was during the pandemic. And I don't think that we should be chopping and changing from one year to the next. We need to provide some predictability and consistency to the community. When we go out and consult on a 10-year plan and we have a good process for getting back public opinion on that, I think it's very unsettling and unpredictable for people if the next year we suddenly decide, oh, no, we can't go out on our round about our 8% increase that we consulted on. We need to chop it back to 4. There's no good evidence or reason for doing that. And in fact, the experiences of 2 years ago should tell you quite the opposite. Anyway, that's my preliminary remarks. But coming on to this particular programme, I agree with Councillor Barrett that this sort of tendency to pick out a few sacrificial lambs and pop them up as a thought about but not included is it's imbalancing people's view of the whole budget. I would much prefer we went out on what we thought was a good option for the city, and then after that people can look at the budget and they may decide that there are other things that we should be cutting, things that perhaps we ourselves haven't put up on the chopping block at this point. But we might hear back from the community that actually, no, this particular programme is one that we don't support. So I would rather that we did that rather than have a list of, well, we could chop this if you like, if you want to save a few dollars here or there. And then coming back onto our purpose, it always seems to be during these annual budget debates that people forget the Local Government Act. The Local Government Act obliges us to consider at least 4 areas of welfare: social well-being, as well as environmental, cultural and economic. And it seems to me that when we have the budget debates, there's very much a focus on economic, and the social, environmental, cultural sort of takes a back seat. As far as I'm concerned, this is a small thing that we can do to improve social well-being. The people who benefit from this, many of them will be renters. Those people are in a very difficult situation at the moment because rents have gone up way more than inflation, and as well as the other inflationary costs. They're not necessarily people that would benefit from the rates rebate scheme. On the contrary, many of our seniors do have community services cards and benefit from the rates rebate scheme. So I think that giving the opportunity for a very small, and it is small, and we're talking, you know, $2.50 a month here, a very small concession to low-income families would be helpful when everybody's budgets are tight. And for me, it goes back to the fact that council used to provide rubbish bags. We used to provide them as part of the rates, and many people still remember that and feel that somehow they're being kind of shortchanged because they don't get a rubbish bag. And I know that I mean, it was before my time, but I know the idea was that people would pay for the rubbish that they produced. But we see the consequences of that in contamination of recycling and fly tipping. And I think that this is worth a go. There's quite a lot of benefits that could come from this, quite apart from the benefits to the individual families, is benefits to us as a city with less rubbish dumping, with less contamination of recycling. So let's give it a go. If you don't do anything different, then you're never going to get a different outcome. So please support this and let's see what it can do. Thanks.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just give my overview and then comments on this one. We've done the 10-year plan last year, and that was in a COVID environment. So I'm comfortable just going, there are projects here that I don't feel have merit, and I'll debate them one by one, and some I'll vote for them and some I won't. But I think overall, when we've been through this process, I'm comfortable that last year we went out to consultation and we were sitting around the 8% for this year. I'm not comfortable with any increase, but the world is as it is, and it's very inflationary at the moment. So I think it's up to our public to have their plan, and they will come back to us and they will tell us quite categorically if they don't want the rises or they don't want the projects. So I'm comfortable, as I say, just to go through and listen to what other councillors have to say, and I will vote accordingly. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to be trying to scrounge, you know, certain monies out at the detriment of the city. So going to this proposal of Councillor Naylor's, I am against it, but I'm for it as well. What I would actually like to see is the amount reduced to 65,000. So if it gets voted down, I'd like to see an amount of 65,000 go towards it, and I'd like to see a trial like we did with the swimming. This is about contamination, and it is a cost to the city, but at this stage we haven't got enough detail around it, and I think it would be really good to have a trial, see if we're getting the results with less contamination, and then it can come back to us like with the swimming, and then we can add more budget if required. So I think we get the best of both worlds, but I think it's critical to do the trial. So if this fails, I'd like to put forward that we keep the budget of $65,000 and go forward with the trial. That's all I've got to say.
So, Councillor, is that an amendment to if this? Sorry, if this.
I can't do an amendment, so I will vote against this one.
Yep.
And if people vote against this, I will put up to.
All right, just make sure you got somebody seconding it.
Yeah, and if somebody seconds it, if they don't, I'll shut up.
I'll be prepared to second it.
Okay, Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And look, I'm going to be really brief on this. I think the figure in there as it stands at the moment actually needs to be included in the consultation document. Putting this thing in a halfway house is it's unhelpful. If we kind of sort of put it in the considered but not included category, then of course the public don't really have an opportunity to consider it. So it needs to be in there. But having said that, Councillor Beattie has raised the idea of a 6-month trial, and if this fails, and I'm not going to support it, then I would be happy to second that. Thank you.
Councillor Dingwell, online.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm going to speak directly to the proposal to remove that program. I don't want to remove that program. I want it to stay in the budget. I think the amount is a good amount. It's been, it was put forward by the officers as the amount that's sort of needed in this space. And it actually says in the consultation document, you know, what do you think about 1 free rubbish bag to low income users? So it's already giving the community an opportunity to say what they think. And they might come back and say, maybe not to low income users, maybe to food banks, or, you know, yes, but maybe not that much. But it's up to the community to actually tell us that. And it will be harder for us to adhere to what the community wants us to do if we don't put it in the budget in the first place. So I'm happy to keep it in the budget on this one. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'm in agreement with a fair bit of what Councillor Naylor has said. I believe the community will tell us if they want things, and if we have a list of stuff that we say was considered but not in, they'll come back and tell us if they want it. I don't think they're going to read through line by line to tell us what they don't want in. As far as the rubbish bag, I'm just a bit interested in that. I mean, I was all for the halving it and doing a trial and looking at some results, because as it seems at the moment, we're hearing from officers that we've got no idea where the contamination is coming from. We don't know what the result's going to be of it. They don't even know whether 165 is the right figure. So to me, we're just splashing something in to have a dabble, when if you're a householder that's throwing your rubbish all over the place and not doing things the right way, you get 1 rubbish bag a month, you're going to fill it up and get rid of it in a week. What are you going to do for the next 3? You're going to go back and do what you were doing. It's called habit. And you ain't going to change it with 1 rubbish bag a week. So if you're going to change it, you've got to give them a rubbish bag a week, not 1 a month. So I'm sort of, yeah, in 2 areas with this. I think it's a great idea to look after those in need, but I just don't see that it's actually going to work. I really don't see that it's going to work. Thank you.
Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I seconded this motion for Councillor Naylor, and I will support it. I do find this discussion really interesting. I have been listening to a lot of people saying that our rates are, because I've heard rhetoric about how high our rates are saying that the rates are too high. Have listened to what Councillor Johnson has said, but people out there really are hurting, and I know they're right in the midst of Omicron, and they are really hurting at the moment. And I know you get sick of that, and I just saw you do a big sigh, but people are really hurting out there, and it is tough. It is really tough. So I'm going to try and bring things...
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Can I just make a point of clarification, since I was accused of something there?
Well, can we just let the councillor finish what she's saying, and I'll come back to you straight afterwards.
She accused me of doing a big sigh, and I think I should be given the opportunity to respond to that.
And you can once she's finished. Thank you.
Very well.
At the end of the day, I'll just finish quickly. I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Johnson.
The reason I sighed is because it's not Omicron, it's Omicron. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to sigh. Deputy Mayor. You need to put your voice on.
Sorry, I've got to get my producer microphone in front of me. Is that better?
That's better.
Great. I'm just going to make a couple of general comments around what has been discussed, and then specifically speak to the recommendation in front of us. I really do agree with Councillor Johnson's comments, particularly around predictability of what we laid out in the 10-year plan last year. I think for me, though, it's not just about the costs that we've indicated to the community by way of the proposed or forecasted rate increases, but it's also around the expectation of work to be completed. And so whether it's, significant infrastructure work, or whether it's a playground upgrade, or, the street being resealed, I actually think that our community do follow along with our discussions and then have a level of expectation around when they should see changes to areas in the community that they take an interest in. So I don't support, as a general move, us kind of nitpicking our way through the plan, particularly for small things that make a direct impact to lots of people. So that's a kind of general comment. In regards to any proposed changes that have already been circulated by some elected members, particularly around anything to do with health and safety, staff wellbeing, wages, I'm just going to take a really firm approach and not support any of those. We get pretty damning quarterly reports coming through to our Finance and Audit Committee, which cover off the vulnerability of our workforce, the risks of our spending, particularly not spending due to staff shortages, turnover, all sorts of things that are raised through those. And we all take quite a level of sympathy with those reports, and there are some really good comments made by elected members when those reports come, but sometimes I feel like when it comes to the actual budget decisions, we forget all of the evidence that's been presented to us, we forget all of those reports, and we forget the figures. We have not kept up, particularly with staff wages and means to support staff wellbeing in this organisation, and so any moves to derail the opportunity to rectify those issues, and there is significant investment required, I won't be supporting, and I will speak against that.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, can we keep to this? I mean, you've made some general comments, but we're going off topic a little bit. Can we?
Yep. These were also introductory comments made by the mover. I won't support the recommendation from Councillor Naylor regarding the rubbish bag proposal, removing that. There's no evidence to say that low-income people currently have a direct correlation to contamination. And so looking at it from a waste minimisation perspective, I think actually at the moment we have got no evidence to take that approach. I really support and endorse the proposal put forward by Councillor Beattie in regards to a trial. Actually, I think that would give us a good level of information, particularly around the uptake. We don't know whether people currently have wheelie bins, whether they currently use our rubbish bag system, whether that would be of use to them. We don't know whether community service card holders are the right target audience, whether we should be targeting, as others have said, food banks or other means of support, some of our social service agencies to disperse rubbish bags. So actually I think if we take an approach where we look at a trial, that would give us the means to be a little bit broader in terms of actually how we achieve some of the outcomes of assisting people. It may only be, as it's been said, a couple of dollars a month, but we hear really clearly, particularly from Councillor Finlay, every annual budget year around what a difference a couple of dollars makes to people. So I won't be supporting this.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this and I don't support it. It's a bit of an anomaly, actually. How do you define low-income households? People are talking about the community services card. Well, people on super don't get the community services card. What about students? Are they low income? And if you talk to the people running the food banks at the moment, there are people who are working who don't get the community services card, are going near for food parcels. They would say they're on low income. So the definition of low income is a bit of an anomaly to me, to be honest. I quite like the idea of Councillor Beattie's trial. And the more I think about how we're going to identify low-income households, the more I think it's going to be a major problem. The best idea I've heard so far is the fact that we could possibly do it through food banks. Because other people are desperate for food, they're definitely the people who are on low incomes. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't make any introductory comments in the light of time. To say I will support this programme. I think it will be of interest to our community and they will tell us. I really do support the idea of a trial, but I think that's, I might be being incredibly naive, but maybe I'm taking that as read, that officers in bringing forward a new programme, should this go ahead, would report back to say how that's going and if we've got our positioning right. So I don't want to vote against this and then vote for a trial option. I want to vote for it. I want to see it go forward into the programme. I think it has real potential to get some of the benefits that we think it has, but as so many have said already, we don't know and we won't know unless we try. So I'm voting to keep it in. Thank you.
Okay, back to right of reply, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, those have been some really interesting comments, and I'd just like to point out a few things. I totally agree with Councillor Johnson and the Deputy Mayor when they say that we shouldn't be chopping and changing an LTP that we consulted on last year. And a couple of weeks ago, you might recall I advocated extremely strongly that I thought the starting point of today should be year 2 of the LTP. And I still think that's where we should have been starting. And in actual fact, then we would be debating whether or not to add this in, rather than I'm suggesting that we take it out. If you look at page 8 of the supporting information, you'll see that our LTP for the year 2 planned on spending 115 million. Now we're planning on spending 118. So that's 3 million of additional expenses that weren't in the LTP for year 2. So I totally think if we hadn't, chopping and changing goes both ways. All the additional operational programs that have been added in on top of year 2 is what has actually put our rates to 8.4%, because with the good work that the officers have done in striking a realistic capital program that has made some positive impacts on other numbers in the budget. We will get to this shortly, but even the remuneration budget is 5 million more than what was outlined in our year 2 of the LTP. So certainly the experience of 2 years ago, what I learned from that was that we could do everything we wanted to do and deliver a lower rates increase and come out with a surplus at the end of the year. And that's what I learned from that experience. So I'm certainly making no apologies of ensuring that these additional items over and above year 2 LTP are properly debated here, because I certainly don't think we should be adding them all in. So I'd encourage you to take that approach also. Thank you.
All right, councillors, so if we can just put the notice of motion back up. All right, so we're going to vote on this one, please. And that has failed with 11 against and 5 for. All right. We might take a quick break here, people, and we'll be back into the chamber at 25 past. I just have and we will adjourn this meeting because we do need to complete part 2 of council. I have a phone call to make, so I just need to do that quite quickly. Thank you.
So do we stay in this meeting or do we go to the other meeting?
So we're adjourning this meeting till tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and we will be back online, people, at 25 minutes past 3 for part 2 of our adjourned council meeting. Sorry to make
so
that.
So we join in a new link?
Yes, a new link will be sent to you all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.